Welcome to this high-level dialogue on the theme of China's high-standard opening up and new drivers for global economic growth. This dialogue is co-produced by CGTN and the China Institute for Innovation and Development Strategy, or CIIDS. I'm Xu Qinduo. Over the past decades, the opening up of China's commodities, services, capital, and labor markets has created great opportunities for international trade and economic cooperation. More recently, China has been pursuing a proactive policy of a high-standard opening up to spur trade, to attract foreign investment, and also to cultivate new growth drivers. To take a close look at that efforts, now we are joined by a group of distinguished guests. They are Hassan Diab, former Prime Minister of Lebanon; Bob Carr, former Foreign Minister of Australia. Thank you. And Wang Hongzhang, Vice Chairman of the Academic Institute of CIIDS and former Chairman of the China Construction Bank. Thank you, Mr. Wang. And Zheng Yongnian, Dean of the School of Public Policy at the Chinese University of Hong Kong in Shenzhen, and Board Director of the Guangzhou Institute of the Greater Bay Area. And Yao Yang, Liberal Arts Chair Professor at the China Center for Economic Research and the National School of Development at Peking University. Welcome to this special dialogue. Now I'd like to invite our guests to give us their thoughts of this important topic, the high standard opening up of China. So each one of you will be given 3 minutes to share with us your thoughts on this topic. I will start with Hassan Diab, please.
Thank you, Mr. Xu. First, I would like to say what a true pleasure it is, as well as an honor, to be at this important event, the 8th UCC in 2024. An important platform to allow China to play a proactive role in promoting world development. We are amidst global transformation at different levels, including economic, technology, education, as well as political levels. This transformation requires nations to open up to each other. China, being one of the largest global economies, has a pivotal role in this task, which it is doing through the high-quality reform roadmap it has committed to for the years ahead. China's achievements over the past decades is nothing less than remarkable. There's no doubt that China's high-standard opening up to the international market has created and will continue to create economic cooperation at the global level. I'm a strong supporter of China, and I think its approach to the international scene is much valued and appreciated by many. Since time is limited, I will talk about my personal experience regarding the importance of building bridges with China at the economic, social, education, and higher education levels. During my term as Minister of Higher Education during 2011-2014, I supported and encouraged several initiatives that has to do with building bridges with China. Among them is teaching Chinese language at the Lebanese University, the only public university in Lebanon, and also Confucius School at St. Joseph University, one of the private universities in Lebanon. During my term as Vice President at the American University of Beirut for 14 years before I became PM-elect in December 2019, as you know, AUB is 160 years old, is among the best in the MENA region. I was the first to push for an agreement between AUB and Languages University in Dalian. This was the first agreement of its kind between AUB and a Chinese university to collaborate on teaching, believe it or not, Arabic language. And they are among the top. When they spoke in Arabic with me, I couldn't believe it. It's perfect Arabic. Also, during my term as Prime Minister, I formed a ministerial committee to open doors with China for implementing mega projects in Lebanon based on the BOT concept, including rail networks, highway networks. So in conclusion, China's opening up to the global economy is certainly important for Lebanon and the Middle East, from my perspective, and certainly welcomed by Lebanon and I'm sure the Middle East region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diab. And next we have Mr. Zheng Yongnian, please.
Thank you. Well, 3 minutes, right? That's too short because China has practiced the open door policy for more than 4 decades. It's very difficult to summarize its main feature in 3 minutes. But in my mind, I think China now we call high standard or high level of open door policy certainly has some features. I think the first feature, of course, very important. It's deeper commitment, deeper political commitment by the Chinese leadership. I think that's very important. Many countries are also, some leaders are talking about open door policy, opening policy, but they don't have deeper political commitment. When they meet difficult, they just give up. They turn to protectionism. So ever since Donald Trump, the first term Donald Trump administration, Chinese leadership has repeatedly emphasized the importance, significance of open door policy. China, of course, has practiced it. The second feature, of course, is free. China has reached a free trade agreement with like 29 countries or country groups. And I think the third feature, very important, is inclusiveness. Inclusive multilateralism, is the core of China open door policy. The U.S., of course, also is practice what is called multilateralism. But I would say, it's quite exclusiveness, exclusive multilateralism. China's multilateralism is inclusive. That's very important. I think inclusive multilateralism is in the same direction as globalization or economic regionalization. Now, a new characteristic of China open door policy, very important, is unilateral openness. That's very important. In recent years, China has now give visa-free policy. So China has literally attracted huge amount of foreigners, visitors, right? So I think that I personally believe China will expand the scope of this unilateral openness to other areas. Like I noticed that, a few months ago, the Chinese government announced the foreign companies, foreign investors can open their hospital in a few cities like Shenzhen, where I am, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing, major cities. The foreign investors can open their hospital for whole ownership. Also, in the manufacturing sector, the Chinese government has lifted almost no restriction now. Welcome, right? So I believe, I also have advocated, to further this unilateral openness, open door policy to more countries, not only to the developing countries, but also to the developed West. That's very important. For example, like One Belt, One Road initiative, the U.S. from the very beginning was against this initiative. But until today, China is still opening its door to the U.S. So as a country, as they, when they feel ready, China welcome to this new system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zheng. And next we have Mr. Bob Carr. Please share with us your understanding of this high standard opening up policy here.
I think for me, the symbol of China's reform and opening up is provided by China's cities. I think China's given the world a new vision of urbanism. We know that the world is going to live with mega cities. Can they work? Can they function? China is at the forefront of demonstrating that you can run cities with populations of, someone mentioned Shenzhen yesterday, 18 million, and make them work with public riches, like great public transport systems, some of the world's best museums, first world museums, which I love, and which I'll investigate here tomorrow. I think China is demonstrating that you can have high densities without a loss of quality of life, and with more, not less, social equity. I think there have been the influences of Hong Kong and Singapore and Japanese cities, but China is making Asian urbanism work on a scale and with a style, with a panache that is a model for Indonesia, for example, but countries outside Asia as well. China is challenged today by China panic. The rise of China has been so rapid and on such a big scale, it challenges the Europeans, for example, who went from thinking of China as a partner, as a competitor, and now they say as a threat. Or Americans who say China is an existential threat to the United States, which is absurd. America has got continental security, and it's beyond being hauled down, its existence being undermined by anyone. But America is a very insecure empire, subject to waves of paranoia, and always, as Bill Clinton said to me on one occasion, always needing to have enemies. China panic is a reality. China needs to draw on all its diplomatic skills to manage that. Here's a challenge for China's opening up. I've got to say that in much of the private sector in the world, people use the expression, China is now uninvestable. I think China needs to interrogate the reasons that private capital in parts of the world has reached that view and seek to counter it with case studies of foreign direct investment in China that have been successful for the shareholders and the managers who made that decision. I had to address over a year ago a conference in Sydney, private sector, big investors, big funds, and I had to address the question, is China uninvestable? And we need, friends of China need to help China interrogate that and rebut it, because it's very damaging. And the only way to rebut it is to provide bountiful case studies of how foreign investment has been successful. The Greater Bay Area, of which this great city, a symbol of Chinese enterprise and Chinese reform, is a part, can help rebut that. But here's a challenge. I don't think there's been an article about the Greater Bay Area vision in the world's financial media. I can't remember reading about it in the Financial Times, and if I read the Wall Street Journal, I'm certain I wouldn't have read about it there. I've missed nothing by not having a subscription to the Wall Street Journal in this respect. But the challenge is real. China needs to sell to the world what the vision of the Greater Bay Area represents. It's a very hopeful vision. It's about infrastructure, it's about innovation, it's about climate, it's about renewables, it's about the public sector, about arts and creativity. That's what it represents. It's very exciting. It's a new way of, to end where I began, of managing the pressure of mega cities, responding to the challenge of urbanisation on a vast scale. But the world doesn't know about it, and it should be sold. And it should be sold as a case study in how China welcomes foreign investment from America and from Europe, from Australia, from Japan, welcomes it, and how that investment goes on, working with the reform thrust in China to be profitable for the people who've placed their funds here. The story needs to be told, and it's only incontestable case studies that will make the case for China in a world that is very competitive and prejudiced in many respects against China's very success.
Thank you, Mr. Bob Carr. And next we have Mr. Wang Hongzhang, please.
好，谢谢。这个刚才讲到了推动高水平对外开放，我觉得。
First of all, I think this is a really good topic. China's efforts to promote high-standard opening up carry special significance against the current complexity of global trade. and in this regard, I want to focus on China's contributions to global trade and the world economy. Mr. Zheng Yongnian just said that China has made many promises to the world, and here I'd like to add a few more points. First, when China talks about high standard opening up, it means China is more deeply integrated with the world, not decoupled from the world. The second point is that China's high standard opening up has played an important role in promoting the global economic recovery. The rise of trade protectionism and the ever-changing geopolitical landscape have exerted great pressure on the global economy. China's economy has so far done quite well, which can contribute to the global recovery. Second, China still enjoys a large market scale, with growing consumption capacity in electric vehicles and e-commerce. Third, high-tech innovation and digitalization have become popular topics in China's economic sector. Against this backdrop, China's dual circulation strategy can also serve as an important engine for the world economy. Fourth, China's macroeconomic performance continues to improve. With the economic stimulus packages released in October, I believe it's within reach for China to realize annual GDP growth of 5% and continue to stimulate world economic growth.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. And next we have Mr. Yao Yang, please.
Over the last 45 some years, China has benefited greatly from globalization. I can also say China probably is the most beneficiary country in the world in the last 50 years. So China supports open international environment, support free trade. The United States probably has a different kind of interpretation of the last round of globalization. They believe that globalization has not served American interests. You can see from this last election, Trump won the election mostly because in the U.S., many people, or the majority of Americans, felt that they have not gotten enough from globalization. To a large extent, we can understand the American position, but the American diagnosis of the root causes, I think, is wrong. The problems in the United States has not been caused by an open international environment. It's mostly about the domestic Americans' domestic problems. It's a economic structure, it's a political structure. So in this circumstance, I think China probably should play a more active role to defend the open international environment. First, China should work with other like-minded countries to maintain and even to strengthen the current international organizations, for example, WTO. And second, probably more doable for China, is for China to invest in other countries, right? So, China's economic growth has been benefiting from open environment and also influx, a huge amount of FDI into the country, right? We have learned a lot from other countries, not just benefiting from the capitals, but also knowledges brought in by international companies. China today is no longer it's kind of a poor country, a country with low technology. China today has the most complete industrial base in the whole world, and China's technology is advanced in many fields, right? If you look around the world, all other countries now, strangely, have the demand from China either to industrialize their countries or to reindustrialize their countries, right? I've been just back from Australia, right? This morning, I talked with Australians. Australia is a leader in green energy. 40% of Australia electricity now is provided by wind and solar power. But most of the equipment are imported from China. Now in Australia, there is a demand for Chinese companies to help Australian companies to set up some manufacturing facilities just in Australia. I think that's natural because for a large country like Australia, it wants to build its own industrial base. And in this case, China can do a lot to help Australia to build its industrial base. In developing countries, that's more so. One thing good about the Chinese industry is that we can provide a whole range of technologies to other countries, from really labor-intensive industries to really high-tech industry, including AI, right? So for other developing countries, China can do a lot of more, right? China is moving a lot of facilities to developing countries, but facing American sanctions, probably China needs to find new ways, a new mechanism to help developing countries to grow their economy and to build their own industries.
Thank you, Yao Yang. I have this question for, let's move on to the next stage of let's more engaged, in-depth discussion of high standard opening up here. Yao Yang, you earlier talked about the Chinese possible investment in Australia to produce solar panels and other related products there. That reminds me of the European Union. There's reports of talk of transfer of technology in terms of EV production in EU countries. How likely is that? Chinese companies going overseas, do the investment and manufacture locally?
Well, it's already happening. Chinese companies have now invested in Hungary, in Italy, I think also in Spain. And also Volvo is producing or has been producing in Belgium. Right? But now the Belgian facility is now producing EVs, Volvo EVs. Okay, I don't think European countries have any restrictions on Chinese EV companies to set up factories in Europe. I think the challenge is still going to be probably from the United States, because in the past, the American administration did that, okay, for example, Huawei. So that's a real challenge. Facing this challenge, it becomes more important for China and European countries to negotiate a settlement on those tariff disputes. I think a better way is to ask European countries to provide more assistance, more policy assurance for Chinese investors to make EVs locally and to help European car makers to go through this great transformation in the auto industry.
Well, investment is one way, but of course also possible pressure there. Let's move on a little bit to, say, Mr. Diab, from Lebanon. We know that China, since 2013, has been the largest trading partner of Lebanon and also the largest market source of imports. Of course, together with Chinese economic role, people do expect China to be more open, to play a more active role in other areas too. What's your expectation?
Well, my expectation is that this will grow. There's a lot of promise in expanding. Right now we're talking about fields such as telecommunications and new energy. And in fact, despite the financial breakdown that took place back in 2019, if we look at the 5-year period between 2017 and 2022, the increase in the cooperation between the two countries increased by 6%, which is significant considering the situation that Lebanon was going through. But I think that we're living in an era where there's a marriage between high-tech, AI, big data, and data science to solve all sorts of problems, from small, electronic devices up to smart cities. And I want to go back to higher education and to universities that are exceptional in Lebanon. I mean, a lot of the students end up in getting their startups in innovation parks, whether in Lebanon or in the region, and end up with companies in Europe or the US. This should be explored, why not China? I'm just saying that there should be other avenues to look at. True, Lebanon is a small country, but we have highly skilled graduates that go to the very top universities. And so we should capitalize on human capital in Lebanon and try to open up doors for outstanding graduates in China, not just in Chinese universities, which are among the best in the world, but also in Chinese research centers and startups.
Yeah, this is another area for opening up, I guess, Mr. Zheng. Of course, you open up open arms to welcome talents from around the world. I mean, make good use of talents not only locally but also internationally. In particular, probably with the competition from the U.S. in high-tech sector. So more, opening up further to welcome people from around the world?
Yeah, sure, because particularly we're in the higher education sector. We welcome all kind of talent to China. Well, earlier on we mentioned China has applied to join CPTPP, has applied to join DPA, all those regional agreement. I think that's important. But for example, China and Europe, we have ended the discussion, the talk of a China-Europe investor deal, right? But if you want European Parliament or those European state parliament to approve that deal, there's no way, because this world becomes so divided, very ideological. So I think, but we can open ourselves. So actually, I'm proposal, we go through all those agreements to look into what we can do to have a unilateral openness policy. We do first, right? We practice first. Well, we welcome foreign investment, European, American to come to China first. Then later on, build up the level of trust. Then we become reciprocal, right? And then the two-way openness. So in the age of political crisis, we have to think about the non-political way to do the business. That's very important.
Well, I have a question, two questions, a couple from Mr. Bob Carr. First one is if there is a Chinese manufacturing investment in Australia, for example, to produce EVs, to produce solar panels, then there will be pressure from Washington. What will be the response from the Australian government?
So here we come to the interesting thing about Australia's position. And it's true, it's worth a case study because it's true of other American allies. Australia is strategically linked to the United States. I would say too closely and too uncritically. But broadly, it has the support of both sides of Australian politics. Yet, Australia cannot possibly go along with any American economic containment policy of China, because it's so obviously not in our interest of growing the Australian economy. China buys over 35% of the goods and services we export. And the trade is growing. Both sides of politics say they're happy with that. Australia and China have worked very closely together on defending the WTO and on a lot of fronts, defending the WTO dispute mechanisms and all the rest. I'd expect that to continue. If Washington expects allies like Australia, there are a lot of them like Australia, to give up their economic relationship with China to match what they're doing out of Washington based on their paranoia about China, they're going to be disappointed. Australia cannot possibly do that.
Let me answer this. Good point there. But then there's earlier you mentioned about Great Bay Area with huge potential of innovation, high-tech development. But still, you don't read any story about the Great Bay Area in Financial Times, in Wall Street Journal. Why?
Well, I think China's got to work harder at promoting it. Any other country making this kind of investment would put a big effort into public relations. I think, for example, the authorities in charge of the Greater Bay Area should be offering journalists from Western media the opportunity to tour the Greater Bay and to pick up all the convincing arguments. This is going to be bigger than other Great Bay economic zones, San Francisco or Tokyo Bay. It's got the mix of cities, including this one, and it's got investment opportunities on every conceivable front. But the scale, the population base wins the argument. But you've got to work harder at getting international media here and astonish them with how this is really going to open up a Greater Bay economy.
That is true. And speak of that, the multilateral system and also open situation of the world economy. And Mr. Wang Hongzhang, we have China is part of the RCEP, this Regional Comprehensive Trade Deal. China is applying to join this CPTPP, Comprehensive Progressive, Trans-Pacific Partnership, with a higher threshold. There's a lot of talk of aligning the Chinese system with that CPTPP. For example, basically is improving the Chinese system to meet those higher standards internationally. Where are we now?
There are many good examples of China's high standard opening up, and the admission to the RCEP serves as one. Besides this, China's Belt and Road Initiative is also a good case. Since its launch, the initiative has been warmly welcomed by relevant countries around the world because everyone can benefit from the common growth of world trade and the global economy. We have a saying in Chinese that if you want to get rich, build roads first. China and the Chinese people have benefited from this model over the past 4 decades since the reform and opening up. And now we are sharing the fruits of development with the rest of the world through the initiative.
Mr. Zheng Yongnian, you mentioned you have been advocating for unilateral opening up for quite some time. Now, of course, China is committed to more reforms, more opening up. But at the same time, we do face domestic challenges and also challenges from outside. For example, tariffs. Trump is coming back with more tariffs, as he said, and also tax restrictions on the export of, technology or export products to China. Is opening up further and continue to opening up enough to deal with that kind of challenge?
Well, first of all, of course, we should have a realistic assessment of possible Donald Trump trade policy. But I think China, as the second largest economy, we should be a bit patient. We should observe Trump for a while, calm down, don't be too emotional. For example, if Donald Trump imposes 60% of tariffs, I believe the U.S. is going to have high inflation again. Well, the U.S. population, Donald Trump is supposed to represent the interests of the working class. So working class will suffer from high inflation. Also, but China, right, I attend this year's Shanghai Import Expo. Huge. I saw many U.S. investors, particularly from agriculture states, they really like China. China has now 400 million population as middle class. It's the single largest market in the world. So no capital will ignore, will give us this market. So I would say, well, we have to be very careful about the U.S. The U.S. is not a unilateral actor. The U.S. is composed of many actors. They are Wall Street, they are agriculture, provinces, they are scientific community, scholars, local states, they have different policy preferences. So I think, I'm proposing we should include the U.S. People, right? Local state, scientific community into our unilateral openness list. We should welcome to come to China. So we have to be very self-confident. We should have confidence to open our door wider, to the world. And it's very important because China market is huge. I think in many areas, we still have room for further openness. Our economy is still growing, a bit slow, but it's still growing. Our middle class is still growing, the size. So we still have a lot of potential. Like this gentleman mentioned, particularly in this Great Bay Area, there's no way for the U.S. to contain China. I worked in Singapore for many years with LKY, Lee Kuan-yew, Mr. Lee Kuan-yew. Lee Kuan-yew, even many decades ago, he already mentioned it. Of course, yes, you can slow down Chinese modernization a little bit, but there's no way for U.S. to contain China's modernization, right?
Mm-hmm. Ms. Bobakar, you were nodding your head. So you agree China will continue to open up, and then that's probably part of the way to deal with the U.S. aggressiveness?
Yes, I think when you have a negative rhetorical opponent, I found this dealing with the media when I was an Australian politician, it's best to keep your cool and pull your punches and be very strategic, dealing with the Trump phenomenon, to be understated, minimize the retaliation, be strategic, work with international partners in support of an open world trading system, as indeed China's been doing with Australia and others when it comes to defending the WTO from American negativity under Biden as much as under Trump.
Mr. Diab, with the continuous opening up from the Chinese side, we do see, for example, as Mr. Zheng mentioned, about an international import expo in Shanghai. Basically, we see goods and services from around the world ready to be exported to the Chinese market. And we know that on the e-commerce, on the e-platform, we have products from Lebanon, which is available to the Chinese consumers. So do you see more potential with China continuing with the further opening up here?
Well, I think the e-commerce example you gave is a good example that was successful in allowing, Lebanese products to be available on the Chinese market, but and this can be expanded. But if I may, humbly suggest something regarding, opening up. What China is doing is great, but from my perspective, specifically in the Middle East, where I come from, I think that opening up should involve more invasive measures. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that, setting up satellite locations of offices, research centers, production plants, whatever, that represents sort of a hub for the Middle East and for Europe. It's like was mentioned yesterday, it's a win-win. It's something that everybody wants, especially that they are opening up for a better world, for a peaceful world, which is, again, what everybody wants.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Wang Hongzhang, we do see with efforts to or the attempt to de-risk or decouple from China, would you see the disruption of supply chain, industrial chain around the world? Earlier you mentioned about the Belt Road Initiative, which is really to build a connectivity with countries, with people. So do you think what kind of solutions or opportunities, with China's high standard opening, that might provide for this world to have basically better connectivity rather than disruption of whatever chain is there?
好，谢谢。这个现在产业链问题，大家
For one, it's true that some countries are hyping up the so-called decoupling. For another, industrial chains may face certain technical disruptions in its development process. But all in all, the restructuring of the global industrial chain is an inevitable trend, and China can help with facilitating the process. First, China can bolster the industrial chains in fields such as AI technologies, e-commerce, and electric vehicles. We have companies with great potential. For example, China's unicorn companies now enjoy a market valuation of over $1 trillion. We also have hundreds of thousands of innovative companies with high market shares and producing specialized goods. China still has lots of room for improvement in terms of supporting these companies to go global and further strengthen their innovation capacity.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. And Mr. Zheng Yongnian, I have a related question, actually. China is opening up focusing on high standard opening up. At the same time, we do see, for example, other countries, in particular the US, they are not really opening up, but they are closing, building a tariff war, and also probably a war against even people-to-people exchange. The latest incident, there's an exhibition, probably CES, Consumer Electronics Exhibition, and Chinese entrepreneurs, Chinese business people, and they failed to get their visa to visit the US. How do you look at that?
I think we don't need to worry about it. I think I remember, for example, after 1949, after the people, the Republic of China were established, we practiced this kind of policy for a period of time, but we lost, right? Actually, we don't. I think Donald Trump will get a big lesson about that. I think yes, competition between China and the United States is inevitable, but competition from what? I think the nature of competition is to say which country is more open, not which country is more closed. Because eventually the final winner will be the one with more open door policy, right? So we have to be self-confident. We have, China actually has growing out of this globalization. We are part of globalization. We have benefited from the last wave globalization. So we still continue to push forward globalization, right? So I think we are in a right direction. The U.S., of course, personally, I understand the certain Donald Trump policy have some rationality. Because, for example, like we talk about EV, we talk about the new energy, because the U.S. is perceived in that area, U.S. industry now is more backward than China. So Donald Trump wants to protect his market for U.S. company. In that sense, it's understandable. But I think the U.S., Donald Trump, his slogan is to make America great again. But I don't think, if he wants to close U.S. door, I don't think he will be able to achieve that goal, to make America greater again. Only by promoting globalization, open door policy, right, he can make U.S. great again.
On that note, we are concluding today's show. Many thanks to our guests for their time and insights. And also thank you for participating in this dialogue, which is co-produced by CGTN and the China Institute for Innovation and Development Strategy. See you next time.